Hey everyone, excited to dive into a topic that's really transforming the way we think about learning. We're talking about inquiry-based learning today.
Absolutely. It's definitely a hot topic in education, and for good reason.
Yeah, I mean, who doesn't love a good mystery, right? Inquiry-based learning is all about sparking that curiosity and empowering learners to find answers on their own.
Exactly. It's all about shifting the focus from passive learning to active learning. Instead of just absorbing information, learners are encouraged to ask questions, explore ideas, and really take ownership of their learning.
So it's like, instead of handing someone a completed puzzle, you're giving them the pieces and saying, go for it, figure it out.
That's a great analogy. It's about giving learners the tools and guidance they need to construct their own understanding. It's not about memorizing facts. It's about developing that deep conceptual understanding.
I love that. So how does this actually play out in a classroom or learning environment? What does the process of inquiry-based learning look like?
Well, picture this. Let's say you're teaching a history lesson about the American Revolution. Instead of just lecturing about dates and battles, you might start by asking a provocative question.
Like, what were the underlying causes of the American Revolution? Something like that.
Exactly. Or even, was the American Revolution truly revolutionary? Something to really get them thinking.
Ooh, I like that. Get those critical thinking gears turning.
Right. Then you might provide them with a variety of sources to explore. Primary source documents, historical accounts, even different perspectives on the event.
So they're not just getting one side of the story, they're getting multiple viewpoints to consider.
And from there, they might work in groups to analyze those sources, discuss their findings, and ultimately draw their own conclusions about the event.
So they're actively constructing their own knowledge. It's not just being handed to them.
Exactly. And in the process, they're developing those critical thinking skills, research skills, communication skills.
It's a holistic approach to learning. It's not just about content, it's about skills too. But IBL, inquiry-based learning, it's not a one-size-fits-all approach, right? I mean, there are different levels of inquiry, right?
Absolutely. There's a whole spectrum of inquiry-based learning approaches.
So tell me about those different approaches. Like, where do we start?
Well, let's start with the most structured type, confirmation inquiry.
Confirmation inquiry. Okay, so what's that all about?
With confirmation inquiry, the teacher provides the question, the answer, and even the method for finding the answer.
So it's like a highly guided inquiry. They're still exploring, but they have a lot of support.
Exactly. It's like learning a new recipe. You have all the ingredients, the steps laid out, and you know what the end product should look like.
So it's about learning the process, getting comfortable with the tools of inquiry.
Right. Then we can move to structured inquiry.
Okay, structured inquiry. How is that different?
In structured inquiry, the teacher provides the question and the method, but the students have to figure out the answer on their own.
So there's a little more challenge involved.
Exactly. They're given the tools, but they have to use them to solve the problem. It's like those escape rooms where you have to decipher clues to find your way out.
I love those escape rooms. I could see how that analogy works. So what's next on the spectrum?
Next up is guided inquiry.
Guided inquiry. All right, what's that about?
With guided inquiry, the teacher provides only the question.
Oh, even more freedom. So the students have to come up with their own methods for finding the answer.
Exactly. They have to design their own investigations, figure out what information they need, and how they're going to find it. This often involves a lot of group work and collaboration.
So they're really taking ownership of the learning process.
And finally, we reach open inquiry, which is the most student-driven approach.
Open inquiry, that sounds pretty free-form.
It is. In open inquiry, the students formulate their own questions and design their own methods for investigation.
Wow, that's giving them a lot of autonomy. So they're driving the learning entirely.
Yes, with the teacher acting as a facilitator, guiding them along the way. It's about encouraging students to follow their curiosity, explore their interests, and really delve into topics that fascinate them.
That's amazing. But with all this freedom, how do you actually structure and implement inquiry-based learning in a classroom setting?
Yeah.
Are there any frameworks or models that teachers can use?
Absolutely. There are several really effective frameworks for implementing IDL, and they provide that structure and guidance.
Well, let's dive into those frameworks then. Tell me more about them.
One popular model is the 5E model.
The 5E model. Okay, what are those 5 E's?
The 5 E's are engage, explore, explain, elaborate, and evaluate.
Oh, I like that. Sounds pretty straightforward. So talk me through those stages. What does each one involve?
It starts with engage. You want to grab the student's attention right from the start, pique their curiosity.
So how do you do that? What are some examples of engaging activities?
You could use a captivating video, a thought-provoking question, a real-life scenario, something to really hook them in.
Like a mystery to solve, a problem to tackle.
Exactly. Then comes explore. This is where students get to roll up their sleeves and dive in. They conduct experiments, gather data, research information.
So they're actively exploring the topic, trying to find answers to those questions that were sparked in the engage phase.
Exactly. Next, we move to explain.
Explain. Okay, so what's happening in this stage?
This is where students share their findings, and with the guidance of the teacher, they start to make connections to build their understanding.
So it's not like they're just left to figure everything out on their own. The teacher is still there to provide support and guidance.
Absolutely. The teacher acts as a facilitator, helping them to connect the dots, clarify any misconceptions.
Okay, I'm seeing how these stages build upon each other. So what's next?
After explain comes elaborate.
Elaborate. Okay, so how do they elaborate on their learning?
In this stage, students apply their newfound knowledge to new situations. They design solutions to problems, or they create presentations to share their learning. It's about taking that knowledge deeper and making connections.
It's like taking it beyond the textbook and applying it to the real world.
Right. And finally, we have evaluate.
Evaluate. So are they evaluating their own work or the work of others?
Both, actually. They're reflecting on their learning journey, assessing their own understanding, and identifying areas for improvement. They're also looking at the process itself. What worked well, what could be done differently next time.
It's about that metacognitive piece, that self-awareness of their own learning process.
Exactly, and that's the 5E model in a nutshell.
Okay, I'm starting to see how these frameworks can provide structure to inquiry-based learning. But that's just one model, right? There are others.
Absolutely. There are several other models that are equally effective.
Well, let's talk about those in our next segment.
Another really popular one is the inquiry cycle.
Okay, the inquiry cycle. Tell me more about that.
So the inquiry cycle, it emphasizes the cyclical nature of inquiry. It's not a linear process. It's more like a continuous loop.
Oh, I like that. It's about constantly revisiting and refining your understanding.
Exactly. And it involves, 6 key phases.
6 phases. Okay, I'm ready. Hit me with them.
It starts with questioning.
Questioning. So are the students coming up with their own questions here?
Yep. They're drawing on their own curiosity, what they want to learn, maybe things they're confused about.
So they're not just answering questions. They're actually asking the questions. I love that. It gives them so much more agency in the learning process.
Right. It's really empowering. Yeah. And then from there, we move on to investigation.
Okay, investigation. So what does that look like?
This is where the students dive into research. Maybe they're conducting experiments, gathering data, looking for information that can help them answer their questions.
Like they're becoming detectives, following the trail of clues.
I like that analogy. Then, once they've gathered enough information, they move on to analysis.
Analysis. So now they're really starting to dig into the information they found.
Yeah, they're looking for patterns, drawing conclusions, trying to make sense of it all.
Critical thinking skills in action.
Exactly. And then the next phase is creation.
Creation. Okay, so what are they creating?
Well, it could be anything, really. It could be a report, a presentation, a video, a model, anything that helps them to synthesize their learning and present their findings in a creative way.
So it's not just about taking in information, it's about producing something new, something that demonstrates their understanding.
Exactly. And then, of course, there's reflection.
Reflection, always a crucial part of any learning process.
Absolutely. In this phase, students take a step back and think about what they've learned, how they've learned it, what worked well, what challenges they faced.
It's about developing that metacognitive awareness, understanding their own learning process.
Right. And then finally, there's sharing.
Sharing. So are they sharing with each other or with a wider audience?
It could be both. They might present their work to their classmates, to their teacher, maybe even to parents or the community.
It's about communicating their learning, getting feedback, and celebrating their achievements.
Exactly. And that's the inquiry cycle. It's a continuous loop, a journey of discovery and understanding.
I like that. A journey of discovery. It sounds like a much more engaging way to learn than just sitting in a lecture and taking notes.
Oh, absolutely. And it leads to much deeper learning and understanding.
So we've talked about the 5E model and the inquiry cycle. Are there any other models that teachers can use to structure inquiry-based learning?
Yes, definitely. Another great one is the 7-phase inquiry model.
7 phases. Wow, that sounds pretty comprehensive.
It is. It provides a really detailed roadmap for implementing inquiry-based learning.
Okay, walk me through those 7 phases. What's the first one?
The first phase is reflecting.
Reflecting. So are they reflecting on what they already know about the topic?
Yes, they're thinking about their prior knowledge, maybe brainstorming any questions that come to mind. They're also trying to identify what they want to learn, what piques their curiosity.
So it's about tapping into that initial curiosity and setting the stage for exploration.
Exactly. Then comes planning.
Planning. Okay, so are they making a plan for their inquiry?
Yes, they're working with the teacher to define their research questions, outline their methods, set goals, and think about what resources they might need.
It's like creating a roadmap for their learning journey.
I like that. And once they have a plan in place, they move to retrieving.
Retrieving. So
Yeah.
retrieving what exactly?
Information. They're gathering data from a variety of sources. Books, articles, experiments, websites, experts, anything that can help them answer their research questions.
So they're becoming researchers, investigators.
Right. And once they've gathered enough information, they move to processing.
Processing. Okay, so what's happening in this phase?
This is where they analyze the data, look for patterns, make connections, and start to draw some initial conclusions.
They're putting on their critical thinking caps.
Exactly. Then they move on to creating.
Creating. So what are they creating?
This is where they get to synthesize their learning and present it in a tangible way. Could be a report, a presentation, a model, a website, something that shows what they've learned and how they've made sense of the information.
So it's about moving beyond just understanding the information to actually applying it, creating something new.
Exactly. And of course, no inquiry process is complete without sharing.
Sharing. I like that. Learning shouldn't be done in isolation. It's about collaboration, communication.
Absolutely. In this phase, students share their work with others, get feedback, engage in discussions, and learn from each other.
It's a social learning experience.
And finally, we have evaluating.
Evaluating. So
Yeah.
are they evaluating their own work, the process, or both?
Both. They're looking back at their process, what worked well, what challenges they faced, how they might improve next time, and they're also evaluating their own learning, their understanding of the topic.
So it's about reflecting on the entire journey and identifying areas for growth.
Precisely. And that's the 7-phase inquiry model, a very structured and comprehensive approach to inquiry-based learning.
It definitely sounds comprehensive. But I'm curious, are there any simpler models out there? I mean, 7 phases, that's a lot to keep track of.
Sure, there are. One that's a bit more streamlined is the inquiry learning cycle. This one focuses on just 4 stages.
Or stages. Okay, I'm intrigued. Tell me more about this one.
It starts with connecting.
Connecting. Connecting to what?
To their prior knowledge, their own experiences, their interests. It's about making the learning relevant and meaningful to them personally.
Oh, I like that. Starting with what they already know and care about.
Exactly. Then comes investigating.
Investigating. So this is where they start to explore the topic.
Right. They're gathering information, conducting experiments, asking questions, doing research, all those good things.
It's about being curious and digging deeper.
Exactly. And then after they've gathered enough information, they move on to synthesizing.
Synthesizing. So are they putting the pieces together, making sense of what they've learned?
Yep. They're analyzing the information, looking for patterns, drawing conclusions. They're constructing their own understanding of the topic.
It's like they're building their own mental model of the topic.
I like that. And then finally, they move on to demonstrating.
Demonstrating. So are they demonstrating their understanding?
Exactly. They're sharing their learning with others, maybe through a presentation, a project, a report. It's about putting their knowledge into action and showcasing what they've learned.
It's about making their learning visible.
Right. And that's the inquiry learning cycle. Simple, but effective.
I like it. It seems like a good starting point for teachers who are new to inquiry-based learning.
Yeah.
But you mentioned that there are other models too. Can you tell me about another one?
Sure. One that's particularly helpful for research is the information search process, or ISP.
The information search process. Okay, tell me more about that one.
So this one has 6 stages: initiation, selection, exploration, formulation, collection, and presentation.
It sounds like it's designed to help students navigate the research process more effectively.
That's exactly what it's for. It provides a framework for students to follow as they're conducting research.
Okay, so walk me through those 6 stages. What's the first one?
The first stage is initiation.
Initiation. What's happening in this stage?
This is where students are becoming aware of what they don't know. They're asking those initial questions, trying to figure out what they need to learn.
It's like acknowledging the knowledge gap, setting the stage for exploration.
Exactly. And then once they have a general idea of what they want to learn, they move to selection.
Selection. Okay, so what are they selecting?
They're narrowing their focus, choosing a specific aspect of the topic to explore.
So it's about refining the scope of their inquiry.
Right. And once they have a more focused research question, they move on to exploration.
Exploration. So are they diving into research at this point?
They're doing some initial research, getting a sense of the key ideas, the different perspectives, the resources that are available.
It's like doing some reconnaissance before diving deep into the research.
Exactly. And as they gather more information, they move on to formulation.
Formulation. Okay, so what are they formulating?
They're starting to synthesize the information they've gathered, refining their research question, maybe developing a thesis statement or a central argument.
So they're starting to shape their own perspective on the topic.
Right. And once they have a clear focus, they move on to collection.
Collection. So they're collecting more information, more data.
Exactly. They're going deeper into the research, gathering specific data and evidence to support their thesis or answer their research question.
It's like they're building a case, gathering the evidence they need to make a strong argument.
I like that. And then finally, we have presentation.
Presentation. So are they presenting their findings?
Yes, they're sharing their research with others. This could be through a written report, a presentation, a website, an infographic, anything that allows them to communicate their findings in a clear and compelling way.
So it's about showcasing their research skills and sharing what they've learned.
Exactly. And that's the information search process. It's a great framework for helping students become more effective researchers.
It sounds very useful, especially in today's information-saturated world. It's more important than ever for students to be able to navigate information effectively and critically.
I completely agree. And actually, there's one more framework that I want to mention. It's called PDAST's 5-phase inquiry model.
PDAST's 5-phase inquiry model. Okay, tell me more about this one.
This model is particularly useful for problem solving.
Problem solving. Okay, I'm interested. How does it work?
It starts with orientation.
Orientation.
Yeah.
So are they getting oriented to the problem?
Yes, they're learning about the problem or the topic. The teacher is setting the stage, providing context, and helping students understand the scope of the challenge.
Okay, so it's like the introduction, the setup.
Exactly. And then once students have a good understanding of the problem, they move to conceptualization.
Conceptualization.
Yeah.
What are they conceptualizing?
They're brainstorming possible solutions, developing hypotheses, thinking about different approaches they could take to solve the problem.
So they're starting to think critically about the problem and come up with potential solutions.
Right. And then they move on to investigation.
Investigation. So they're investigating their hypotheses.
Exactly. They're gathering data, conducting experiments, analyzing information, anything they can do to test their hypotheses and see if they hold up.
It's like they're scientists testing their theories.
I love that analogy. And then based on their findings, they move on to conclusion.
Conclusion.
Yeah.
So they're drawing conclusions about their hypotheses.
Exactly. They're analyzing their data, figuring out what it means, and drawing conclusions about the problem they've been investigating.
So it's about making sense of the evidence they've gathered.
Right. And finally, they move on to discussion.
Discussion. So are they discussing their findings with each other?
Yes, they're sharing their conclusions, their insights, their challenges, and getting feedback from their peers and the teacher.
It's about making the learning a social process, a shared experience.
Exactly. And that's PDAST's 5-phase inquiry model, a great framework for guiding students through the problem-solving process.
I can definitely see how that would be helpful. It provides a clear structure for tackling complex problems. So we've covered a lot of ground here. We've talked about the 5E model, the inquiry cycle, the 7-phase inquiry model, the inquiry learning cycle, the information search process, and PDAST's 5-phase inquiry model. Wow, that's a lot of frameworks. Seems like there's a framework out there for just about any type of inquiry-based learning you could imagine.
There really is. And the great thing is that teachers can choose the framework that best fits their teaching style, their students' needs, and the specific content they're teaching.
That makes sense. It's about finding the right tool for the job. But let's shift gears a bit and talk about the benefits of inquiry-based learning. Why should teachers even bother with all these frameworks? What makes inquiry-based learning so special?
Well, for starters, inquiry-based learning leads to deeper understanding. Because students are actively engaged in the learning process, they're not just passively absorbing information, they're actually constructing their own understanding.
So it's not just about memorizing facts, it's about really understanding the concepts and how they connect to the bigger picture.
Exactly. And that deeper understanding leads to better retention.
That makes sense. If you really understand something, you're more likely to remember it.
Right. And when students are curious and engaged, their brains are more likely to encode that information into long-term memory. It's like when you're really interested in something, you just naturally remember it better.
I know that's true for me. If I'm fascinated by a topic, I can remember details that I would never remember if I was just trying to memorize them. But it's not just about knowledge and retention, right? Inquiry-based learning also helps students develop other important skills.
Absolutely. It helps them develop critical thinking skills, problem-solving skills, communication skills, collaboration skills, all those 21st century skills that are so important for success in today's world.
It's about preparing students for the real world, not just for tests.
Exactly. And maybe even more importantly, inquiry-based learning can foster a love of learning.
A love of learning. Now, that's a powerful thing.
It is. When students get to experience the joy of discovery, the satisfaction of figuring things out for themselves, it can ignite a passion for learning that lasts a lifetime.
It's about making learning fun, engaging, and rewarding. But I'm curious, what are some specific examples of inquiry-based learning activities that teachers can use in their classrooms? I mean, can you give us some concrete examples of what this might look like in practice?
Oh, absolutely. Let's say you're a science teacher and you're teaching a unit on plant growth. Instead of just lecturing about photosynthesis and plant parts, you could have your students design and conduct experiments to investigate different factors that affect plant growth.
So they're asking their own questions, making predictions, designing experiments, collecting data, analyzing results.
Exactly. They're becoming scientists.
I love that. What about in a history class? How could inquiry-based learning be used in a history class?
Well, let's say you're studying the American Revolution. Instead of just reading a textbook, you could have students explore primary source documents like letters, diaries, speeches, and political cartoons to understand different perspectives on the events leading up to the revolution.
So they're getting a firsthand account of history, seeing it through the eyes of the people who lived it.
Right. And they're also developing their critical thinking skills as they analyze those sources and try to piece together the bigger picture.
Those are some great examples. Are there any others you want to share?
Sure. How about field trips? Inquiry-based learning can transform a traditional field trip into an engaging learning experience.
I can see that. Instead of just passively observing, students could be given challenges to solve or questions to investigate related to the place they're visiting.
Exactly. They could be tasked with collecting data, conducting interviews, or documenting their observations.
It's about turning the world into their classroom.
I love that. And what about classroom debates? Debates are a great way to engage students in inquiry-based learning.
Oh, I can see that. Students would have to research a topic, develop arguments, and present their perspectives in a clear and convincing way.
And in the process, they're not only learning about the topic, but they're also developing critical thinking skills, communication skills, and the ability to see different sides of an issue.
That's so important, especially in today's world where we're constantly bombarded with information and different perspectives.
Absolutely. And let's not forget about group projects. Inquiry-based learning can breathe new life into group projects.
I can see that. Instead of just dividing up the work and regurgitating information, students could be given a real-world problem to solve or a challenge to tackle.
Exactly. They'd have to collaborate, brainstorm ideas, design solutions, and present their findings.
It's about making learning authentic and relevant.
Right. So those are just a few examples of how inquiry-based learning can be implemented in the classroom. And the possibilities are truly endless.
So many great ideas. But as we wrap up our discussion today, I want to leave our listeners with a thought-provoking question. What if we applied the principles of inquiry-based learning to other areas of our lives, not just in the classroom?
That's a great question. What if we approached problem solving at work or decision making in our personal lives, or even our understanding of current events with that same spirit of curiosity, that willingness to question, to explore, to dig deeper?
It's about embracing a mindset of lifelong learning, a mindset of continuous inquiry.
Exactly. It's about seeing the world through a lens of curiosity, always asking why and how, and never stopping learning. It's about being open to new possibilities and new perspectives and challenging our own assumptions. You know, inquiry-based learning, it's not just a teaching method, it's really a way of being in the world.
It's a way of thinking, a way of approaching life.
Yeah.
And that's what makes it so powerful, right? It's about giving people the tools and the mindset they need to navigate a world that's constantly changing, a world that's full of complex challenges.
Exactly. It's about empowering people to become lifelong learners.
And that's what we all need, right? To be curious, to be engaged, to be constantly learning and growing. So to wrap things up, I want to encourage everyone listening to embrace that spirit of inquiry.
Yes. Never stop asking questions and seeking answers.
Don't be afraid to challenge the status quo, to think outside the box.
And most importantly, never lose that sense of wonder.
That's what makes life an adventure, a journey of discovery.
Absolutely.
Thanks for joining us for this deep dive into inquiry-based learning.
It's been a pleasure.
We hope you've learned some valuable insights and are feeling inspired to bring more inquiry into your own life and maybe even your classroom.
And remember, the journey of learning never ends.
Keep exploring, keep questioning, keep discovering.